I find these scores really fascinating because they're unlike anything I've ever seen before regarding um, music composition. So I think they're very unique and really question the approach that I take to playing a piece. And I've enjoyed getting to know them in a different way than I typically would with a score that has a bunch of notes on it that's completely through composed and is ready for me to in, interpret in a very specific way, and also in a way that has been taught through the ages. So I think these are really cool. The other thing that's interesting for me about these pieces is that they're really exploring almost a macro level. I think the they're each piece is about as macro as you could get. You could probably go up one or two more levels, but it's really outlining, hey, this is how you construct the piece, blueprint, right? This is how you make it. And so starting from a bird's eye view and going into the piece is a really beautiful way to approach it. And I think that in this regard, it is going to, I know it's going to um, cause me to start with intention. First, so I'll have this intention of, hey, I see these things on the page and I have to interpret this macro level of this piece. This is how I want to interpret it. And then I will start going in and figuring out each section, how these sections relate to each other, and what they sound like, and how those sounds go together, and how I want to play those sounds, and uh, what the affect is going to be. So I like that. Versus if I were sitting down and opening up a score of Bach, I might sight read through it, and then there's an intrinsic knowledge. So this is very, very explicit versus implicit. I like that. I think that these pieces also, for me, are going to, uh, in a very wonderful way, require a lot of active imagination. I really am intrigued by the small amount, but very specific, or sorry, I need to come up with a good word here. Uh, these key words that have a lot of imagery around, potential imagery around them,
Mhm.
and imagery that could be different for each person. Like one is called Late Fall Dusk. And although each person may have a slightly different feeling of what late fall dusk means to them, I think it's pretty universal. One person's late fall dusk is also relatable to by another person, even though their late fall dusk might be a little different. So there's a little bit of a universality, um, and also very specific nature, individual nature for each of these pieces, I believe. So that's sort of my general impression of the pieces. Approaching the pieces, I first have started by going through and listening to the scales and internalizing those. And each page starts with a scale or a mode. And then clarifying the score, so making sure that I know what each of the things on the page means, what I'm supposed to interpret, and then maybe there are some things that I need to clarify the intention of the composer, because some of the notations are new to me. Then for me, the next thing on my process is to go through it, and I think there's some composing that needs to happen in order to play these pieces. And so figuring out where the climax of each piece is. And a lot of times in composition, you want that to be the golden section, the kind of about 2/3 of the way through. And I think as I've looked through these pieces and the descriptions written, I think that was taken into consideration, or at least it could be taken into consideration in the realization of these pieces. So kind of figuring out where each thing is leading to. And then I've thought about, how are these pieces? I have 4 pieces, and so how are these related to each other? And interestingly, the score that I received is numbered, page 1, page 2, dot, dot, dot. But the numbers of the blueprints go in order 6, 23, 17, 31. So I'm unsure if they were published in a full album, if they would be in numbered sequential number, or if they would be out of order. But I've actually decided that I'm not going to ask the composer about that. I think that I would like to play them in the order that I've received them. And so this is starting my own individual decision-making process on interpreting these pieces. And I've chosen to do that because the first piece is called Late Fall Afternoon, and the last piece that I received is called Late Fall Dusk. And I like the idea of those two pieces bookending the set, because I think that because those time-wise, like afternoon into dusk are sequential, I think that the beginning and the end can tie together, and I think it would make a nice set, kind of a reprise at the end. Maybe those two pieces, my realization of those two pieces could have elements in common. In my life, I've done a fair amount of drafting. I worked as an architect for a long while. I created a lot of blueprints. I've also done a lot of sewing, starting with a pattern and creating a garment or a quilt or curtains or whatever, purses, whatever. And so the name Blueprints also brings up that experience for me. And I think that it's apt to tie into those experiences as well, because that some of the things I've learned, many things I've learned through doing those processes, but two things that come up into my mind are the final product is very dependent on the materials you use. So you can have the same pattern for a purse, and depending on if you use leather or if you use a floral cloth, you can have the same bag shape, but the purse will look very different. And then the second thing I have found over the years, especially through architecture and through sewing too, but the quality of the craftsmanship drastically affects the product too. The materials you use and the quality of the craftsmanship. So I think, for those are kind of two things that are going through my mind as well, is what materials are going to be used, and what is the quality of this craft. So I guess those are the things that I've started with in terms of looking at these pieces and starting to come up with how I want to play and interpret them.